Welcome back to Two Homers and a Realist.
Are we all realists this week?
Yeah, maybe a bunch of realists, maybe a bunch of pessimists, but I don't know what the right descriptor is. It is a rough time. The Sooners lose to TCU 55-24, and I don't think the score tells just how bad and painful that was. Last week you could say the same thing, but this is totally different. This was really, really painful. First, before we introduce ourselves, I just want to say kind of thoughts and prayers going out to Damon Harmon and his family. Hope that he's okay. Hope that everything's as good as they possibly can be for him. Obviously, the same can be said for Gabriel or any injured player. But his in particular looked really, really bad. Very sad to see someone carted off the field. Hopefully it was all just a mostly precautionary situation. We obviously don't know much about it at this point. But I'm Steve.
I'm Connor.
Lucas.
Jay's not with us. Jay is somewhere in hiding. He promises to come out as soon as the Sooners do as well, because they seem to be AOL from at least what we saw earlier in the season versus what we're seeing now on the football field. Things just continue to get worse and weirder. So I was thinking we could just change this to be an opera podcast. We could watch opera. We could talk about it. Bizet's Carmen.
It'd be more pleasant.
We could, there's a bullfighting theme there, so that's kind of like sports. But OU seems to be a tragedy. So it seems to be some kind of operatic tragedy where obviously what they're doing is trying to ruin our lives and make us miserable people, since it's all about us. But no, it's a really, really frustrating thing to basically have your season end 5 games into the season. That, in a sense, is what has happened. In terms of what our typical goals are and dreams, we're realizing what this team is, realizing what our limitations are. And even if this was aberrational and this isn't really the true picture and we turn things around, you're still not going to accomplish the things that, as an OU football fan and an OU football team, you seek to do year in and year out. So that's where it becomes really, really disheartening. And I would say right now we are at the risk of complete collapse, that things could come devastatingly bad for us for the rest of the year along multiple fronts. But maybe I'm being too much of a catastrophist. What do you guys think?
I'm with you. I mean, talking to some people after the game, you look at the schedule ahead. You hope you have a couple layups there, but after what I saw today and after what I'm seeing from other teams, I mean, we're watching Oklahoma State handle Baylor. We're watching Baylor still look pretty decent at the same time.
Kansas is beating Iowa State.
It's just, there's not a gimme game on the schedule at this point. And like you said, you are at a risk of kind of a collapse, and catastrophe is a great way to put it. I don't know if it's one of those things where we can say we're so, I can say, yeah, this is, obviously we're disappointed, but I'm hoping we can lean on the fact that what we've talked about in the past with a young team and establishing a new way of playing and new principles and new philosophy is overall going to win the day as we see this team grow. But right now, after today, the identity of this team is so at a loss. I think not only with the fans, but I mean, I don't even know if the players know what they need to be doing a lot of the time. So you look at the injuries that happened, and you look at guys who you hope can come in and step up. Outside of Javonte Barnes today, I don't know if there's a single player that you can say, oh, that's going to be a difference maker, filling a spot or something like that. So it's concerning, to say the least. And it's just kind of a numbing factor as well. I mean, last week really sucked. Like, this week was not fun to have to deal with that loss. And then you watch today and it's like, oh, okay, so this is who we are right now. Like, this is where we're at as a team. And it's discouraging. So, I don't know. Lucas, any thoughts?
It's very disheartening. I think after last week's game, we all thought we were a play or two away. We had the 3rd and 16 that ended up, going long ways. And otherwise, if they punt us, we get the ball back, maybe a chance to go tie it up. This game was over midway through the midway through the second quarter. They just ran up and down the field on us. and we had no response essentially on offense for the most part. And we had 10 possessions in the first half, and we had 17 points to show for it. It was just like literally steamrolled right down the field on us. And I didn't see anybody at all on defense that looked like they belonged on the field. Billy Bowman got hurt early, which I think really hurt us on at least two of the big plays that they just threw the ball down the field to wide open receivers.
Yeah.
And I tend to think that if he's in the game, he's probably in coverage and doesn't give those up, even though
He's in the right spot.
he's in the right spot.
Yeah.
And even though he gave up drives while he was on the field, we weren't giving those kind of long passes up.
Yeah.
And our corners looked horrendous in the first half because they would not turn their head around. They just kept throwing the ball deep, and
They were
it was
beat in
pass
every
interferences. Yeah.
facet. Just,
Which one of those was probably the way to go because it would have been a touchdown instead.
it's
But
just disappointing that
it's,
you're at
it's
that
like the
point.
guy didn't just turn your head around. Not to mention, was it Harrington had one in the second half where they throw the ball deep, and he literally has a line on the ball to intercept it, and he pulls up at the last minute
to hit the player. No, it was.
to.
No, it was Harrington.
Was it Harrington?
Yeah, coming
and
over
he
the
didn't
top.
even really hit the player. He just it was like he was trying to avoid the contact, maybe because we had already got the pass
Oh yeah.
interferences.
That was Harrington. I'm
But
thinking of the one
he
where
went to intercept
where
the ball.
the guy was early,
Oh yeah.
and that was another one where he didn't play the ball.
Yeah,
Instead, he played
Trey
the hit.
Morrison. Yeah.
Yeah,
We had
yeah.
one that we had a dropped interception that actually ended up in the wide receiver's hands.
Just a pick
I don't-
six.
Yeah, a pick six. Who was that?
Deshaun White.
Deshaun
White. Yeah, have we said that
Name
name
of the
before in
day,
States? Yeah. So I don't see any positives whatsoever from this game other than Barnes looked good filling in for Major. I don't know why Major was out. I don't know if it was injury or what. We found out, an hour before the game
Yeah.
that he wasn't playing.
Yeah.
And then we were kind of like, well, that might be good for Barnes because he's going to get some carries.
Yeah.
And then Gray goes down, which,
Gray was pedestrian today.
Yeah.
He ran very poorly in decision making. I would say decision making all around just seemed awful, including guys not being able to make a decision or know where they're supposed to be.
much like the backup quarterback.
Bevel.
Speaking of not making decisions, he gets
yeah.
in the game. We hand the ball off a couple times and score. Great, but you can't just run the ball the rest of the game. Obviously, when we're playing from behind too, but you have to do something with your arm. And he would drop back and just take sacks because he would double clutch it or he would second guess what he was seeing and do literally nothing with the ball. And this is your shot to prove that you belong on the field. And I was surprised that they didn't put Booty in at least at the end of the third quarter to start the fourth, and let him. Even if he throws a couple picks because he's trying to force the ball into somewhere, at least he's not just swallowing it and taking a sack.
Well, and if you lose one more game, in my opinion, and nowadays, you're out of Big 12. You're almost guaranteed out of Big 12
We're
contention
0-2
after
in
today.
conference already.
Right. So, but if you lose one more, in my opinion, you start running all the young guys out there, and you say, all right, now we tried it with the team that we had to instill this philosophy and these principles. It's not working with the Deshaun Whites of the world and the Justin Broyles of the world. I need to get my guys in there who I know are going to compete for jobs as we grow as a team next year, and you need to start playing them. I mean,
I agree.
it's just it was phenomenal. Even the veteran play or the veterans that we had out there today, and just how
The ineptitude.
lost they looked.
Completely lost.
Even
Stutzman looked like he
Stutzman.
regressed, yep.
Even Stutzman. I don't know if Stutzman's like, man, I need to be the guy, and he can't handle
I
it.
don't remember Guebu
Or
doing
what?
anything whatsoever
No.
today.
I mean, it'll be interesting to go
He had
back
one
and look at
move
the
on
stat
guy
line there.
in the
but
fourth quarter, which is meaningless. Well, it's like you guys are reading my sheet because you're touching on several things I wanted to talk about. I'll hit the first one that you touch on, Lucas, which talking about Bevel, and I think that's a microcosm of the entire team, that we seem to be way too risk averse. In his particular case, you have nothing to lose in the game that you're in for the reason you're in and the way that you're in and the score that it is. Throw the ball. Get it out of your hands. If he's worrying tight about throwing an interception because he may lose his backup role to someone else, then he's already not the right guy for the job. And if the coaches aren't realizing that and putting him either in a forced position to throw the ball or benching him for someone who will release the ball, that's a mistake on their part.
Yep.
So that was very confusing. I would have liked to and thought we deserved to see some other quarterback play deep into that game after it was just stalling out. I guess my two thoughts were, in their defense, maybe the coaches are thinking what we see in practice and what we know, Bevel is definitely our second best option, and we're now more sensitive to a Gabriel injury, or perhaps they suspect how bad Gabriel's injury is, and that next week against Texas we need the most experienced guy we can get. But I think if that's true, I kind of still think that's bad thinking, because everything is in such disarray right now, and you clearly don't know enough to know definitively who is where. I think you need to take more chances and just see if you can discover something about a guy in this type of a moment. And you want someone who will take a lot of chances. I don't like how, we mentioned this before, I think, that we probably were not taking enough chances, therefore weren't having the interceptions that you would intend to have in a passing offense like this. And that, again, is just a microcosm of other ways we seem to be playing it safe. We seem to be playing it safe on defense. We seem to be playing it safe in the run game. And I think we got that too burned into our brains. It's doubly tough and a mistake when you're just not talented enough to overcome what conservativeness does for you and have enough talent to pull through a difficult situation. We just don't have that talent level.
Yep.
And that gets back to then two other points on my sheet. One is personnel decisions, and I got question mark, question mark, question mark. What are we missing about who is playing where? Is that back to the conservativeness and they're going with the upperclassmen? And if that's the case, it's clearly time to throw that out. And I'm not saying throw caution to the wind, but you got to start building for the future. And that means playing loose, getting a lot more people in there, and seeing what you can develop for the future, much less just maybe rescue this season. But I don't understand some of these guys that are playing and why they're playing. They seem to be just out of sorts, without a clue as to what their role is, and very much not as athletic as the competition they're going up against.
Yeah, and I think the thing that's concerning for me is, we didn't get just rated on defense in the portal like we did on offense, right, from the coaching changes. I know
we did lose 4 or 5 guys.
We lost some guys in the NFL. We lost, but I mean, even
people that left early too.
People that left early, you got to count that.
But that being said, and I'm not at all saying that Grinch's philosophy is. I trust Venables and the way he runs his defense. Maybe it's more so Ted Roof and how he's doing things. I'm not sure what the dynamic there is.
I was worried about that.
But
So.
I mean, at least we're running. Last year we were running different guys out there. Given they may not have been in the right spots, or too much of it. And so there's a balance. But today was just a bunch of the same over and over and over again. So, I mean, we talked about it during the game. We didn't see Kanik out there until the fourth quarter.
Mm-hmm.
And
in a blowout, essentially.
In a blowout where it's like, all right, go get your reps now. It's like, it's a little late for that, bud. Like, if I'm looking at this game today and I look towards next week, towards Texas, I want Kanik in the game at some point.
Right.
So let's go get him some reps, just like you're getting potentially Bevel some reps, because he might be the starting quarterback. But get some guys out there who are going to make a difference in the game. And I think that's been a key theme, especially the last 2 weeks. We have had 0 difference makers.
Where was the defensive line that the first 3 games of the season led the country in tackles for loss? We were still getting to the quarterback and getting sacks or hurries. Today, we didn't
another
have
0 sack game.
Sacks.
0 sacks.
I don't
nominal
remember.
Tackles for
we
loss.
We might have had 1 tackle for loss, maybe. Right. We did have a 3-man front for the majority of the day, and they would bring a 4th, either a Guebu or Stutzman. But we got out schemed and out coached. There were many plays that we blitzed a corner on a play, and they had the perfect play call where they did the super quick pass to the wide receiver.
Either sort of a bubble screen or a pure screen.
They did another where they had what was the other one that was just like that, where they had the perfect play call? Was it a screen?
It was a
to the
screen
running
play.
back?
Yeah.
We blitzed.
Allowed the blitz over
had the
pursuit.
Screen perfect and got 20 yards on a screen play. It was like every time we guessed with pressure, they perfectly called the right play.
They did.
And it just seemed over and over that happened.
And then also on offense, they seem to be blowing up our plays when we would go one way or the other. Whatever we were trying to do, they were in the perfect defense for it. It's
Just
as if they could
we look
see.
so predictable.
Yeah, so I would attribute to predictability. I'm not going to accuse them of like having stolen our signs or something. I have no proof or no indication of that at all. I would just say it is as if they could completely predict what we were going to do or knew what we were going to do. Very frustrating, and definitely a sign that you're getting out-coached.
How much info did Lincoln Riley give to Garrett Riley on particular defensive players' weaknesses?
That could be. There could be some of that. So, well, to blame Riley a little bit and to let the coaches off the hook a little bit, this touches on something you were saying, Connor, but maybe a little bit in agreement with Lucas saying that we did lose a lot of people. We lost a lot of people off of already a depleted group where we felt like we were a team year by year under Lincoln not filling up with replacements as good as what we were losing, and especially on defense. Now, defense may have been getting stronger, but all of a sudden we lost a lot of guys going early, a few guys transferring.
In the front seven.
In the front seven mainly, and anytime you lose a good group from a complete unit, that is really tough because, especially on the defensive line, it's where the game is played and won usually on the line of scrimmage.
But it didn't affect us the first 3 games.
It didn't. I want to get to that too.
Really,
I want to talk
Nebraska
about that.
must be
awful,
top 5
awful.
worst team in the country.
Right.
Kent State is still pretty good, I feel like.
They're going to
cover
cover
I don't think they're last year's Tulane necessarily, but we showed flashes for 3 games of playing great defense.
Yeah, and you're still playing Division I football against these first 3 teams, right? And you're still the
kids on those teams were still the best player in their high school.
Yes,
they weren't good enough to go to a top tier Power 5 school, but they were still the best player on their high school team.
And they're athletic, and we're still making plays that we have not made in the past 2 weeks at all.
Not even close.
Reggie Grimes has been a ghost.
Yeah,
that was one of my.
Ethan Downs has done nothing.
One of my points I wanted to make
all
is
year.
Yeah.
What OU team is the real team? The first 3 games or the last 2, or what are we missing here? Because those first 3 games weren't against any cupcakes. There wasn't a who is the team from last year? Western Carolina on the schedule.
Yeah.
UTEP
wasn't horrendous.
UTEP wasn't horrendous. Kent State
could be decent.
Played well against
Nebraska
Georgia.
Is bad.
Nebraska is very bad. It was in a tough environment, and they still have athletes.
Yeah.
So, and we devastatingly dominated them.
Yeah.
So what in the hell is the difference between that and what's happened in the last 2 weeks?
And our guys, is this a Schmitty effect of our guys look slow? Did they bulk up too much and they're just not able to have the speed?
Or their body's stressed too much and that's catching up to them fast?
We're getting outrun by quarterbacks 2 weeks in a row.
Are we playing too rough in practice? I mean, any of these things
before I lean on the speed, I still lean on people just aren't in the right place.
Right. When you look at those guys that are wide open,
you watch Key Lawrence take an angle who's taking an angle
the wrong angle altogether.
It's like, man, that's just not
football.
Playing football correctly.
Football. Right.
So I mean,
and then the receivers that were slipping behind us and being wide open, not on a streaking route necessarily, but just really drifting into a hole in the defense and standing by themselves.
Yeah.
As if it were a trick play that they were running or something.
Right.
It wasn't a flea flicker. It was just a normal quarterback drop back, and there's a guy ridiculously wide open.
Yeah, that one, they went to the replay and they circled, I think it was Broyles, who completely bit because there was a running back that had come out of the backfield uncovered.
No, it was Deshaun White. Deshaun White was in coverage out on the outside and had his eyes in the backfield the entire time, and the dude he was supposed to be covering.
The running back came out of the backfield and was wide open about 5 yards past the line of scrimmage, and Deshaun White just let the wide receiver go.
Yeah,
and it was 60
that's the one where Harrington tried to catch him from behind. Yeah.
Now, boy, there's a lot of thoughts going through my head here. I wanted to, when I'm watching this Baylor game against Oklahoma State, and I'm thinking how, in most cases, we never got blown out like this in the Lincoln Riley years. But of course, we always had very, very good offenses that could put points on the board and could keep up
and could control the ball.
Or
we're running tempo like we are.
Well, even if they were running, I mean, the tempo wasn't an issue. I mean, back in Baker's days.
No, I'm talking about the tempo.
Kyler.
Today.
Well, no, but it was as if it was the same tempo. We were scoring with a minute. Like, it was ridiculous.
Well,
And
the Baker and Kyler days. The last 2 seasons really weren't.
no, but
the
think
last 2 seasons were
I'm looking
sustained
at this
drives.
Baylor game, and I'm remembering where we almost got blown out by Baylor, but we have that tremendous come from behind,
Hurts.
biggest comeback ever, and that's Jalen Hurts.
Yeah.
So we got, again, we've said this a lot, we got spoiled by how good our offense was, and when we're trying to do the comparable, this defense may just be comparable to a Lincoln Riley era defense. It's just the same old, same old. We just don't quite have the offense because of the losses that we had
to
catch back up. You know, we lost a lot of guys off of that, and it's a new system.
I thought the same thing. I mean, you look at even before the injury today, but with Dylan Gabriel, I mean, I'm not going to say he's not it because he's what we have, and he's clearly better than what we have at number 2.
Yeah.
But I mean, it is very hard to get used to the fact that we have a quarterback that isn't just going to make throws consistently.
Yeah, he's going to make the plays. He's
anytime he's in the pocket, you have no idea what you're about to get because every time he throws the ball past 20 yards, it's basically, well, he might hit it, he might not. In the past 2 weeks, he hasn't hit it.
And he's just, even though we were sharing this week, his stats were actually as good or better in every category than were the stats. We got a carpenter bee bugging us. Don't worry, they don't sting people. They really don't. As Dylan Gabriel's stats in every category are as good or better than Caleb Williams going into this week. Now, there won't be surely now after I'm sure he'll have a pretty good game against Arizona State. But that belies something that's a greater truth, and that is not to necessarily compare him to Caleb Williams, but to compare him to the quarterback we expect to have. He's just not good enough.
Yeah.
He doesn't make the key throw and the key decision you need him to make when you need him to make it.
And I think, I mean, I made a rash tweet during the game, but it was after, I mean, it was mistake after mistake or miss after miss. And, to that point exactly, Steve, it's, from what we've seen, we've watched every game. We've been to every home game. Screw the stat line. I don't know if Dylan Gabriel's very good. Like, right. I'm not saying
the whole first quarter, I mean, how many overthrows do we have?
Yeah, I'm not saying he's not a serviceable quarterback. I think a lot of people would be like, yeah, I would love for him to go and be the guy who has the ball in his hand every play for my team.
But he's just another guy.
But when you're Oklahoma,
yeah.
Why did he have so many overthrows to start the game?
Right.
I mean, we had to punt. I mean, we had 10 possessions in the first half again and had 17 points, and we had drive killers because he overthrows a wide open Drake Stoops on a 3rd and 7. He overthrow a Marvin Mims on a
and last week it was the run game that I felt like stalled us out more than anything. This week it was the passing game after maybe winning 1st and 2nd down where you're stalling out because your quarterback can't make a routine throw.
Yep.
Well, I'm looking at stats, and I mean, they only had 7 more first downs than we did. They beat us by 31 points.
What was the time possession stat?
Well, if you look back at a lot of the
32-49 to 27-11.
I've always noticed that. If you look back, but all of those are
big
just
plays.
They're not that important. The big
plays.
important stat is points. If you look back at OU games, we're almost always that way against our opponent, just the other side of it.
I mean,
we were winning games by 31 points, and again, only getting 7 at most more first downs, et cetera.
313 more yards. They had 668 to 355.
So what you and I, Lucas, were debating a little bit earlier on this, so I'll pose this question. In the attribution of where the team is in the loss today, how much do you attribute it to players? How much do you attribute it to coaches? And I said an other, but I don't know if there is an other. I don't think there was any. I mean, there's a luck factor that's probably not going in our favor right now, but it's pretty minor, other than the injuries.
The luck factor to start the game was ridiculous because I don't think Mims caught that ball to fumble it.
I would totally agree with that.
He did not make a football move. They never – I guess they reviewed it, but they did a call stands. He caught it and made one step before it came out.
But it was before securing it.
So,
he never secured it into his hands.
Turning. He's secure.
That's the first
he's
drive
on a
of the
turn
game.
and securing it when it's punched out.
Yeah.
And not that it necessarily is going to, but it could have swung this game. It could have made it a close game.
It set a tone.
It set a tone.
set
Well,
a
gave him
tone.
a touchdown.
Yeah.
And we were moving the ball.
Mark Bradley against USC fumbles a punt, and then it's all downhill from there.
Things happen. I mean, it's a game of a lot of luck and a lot of
momentum
chaos.
swing. And then it was literally injury. Bowman gets hurt.
Uh-huh.
And then Gabriel gets hurt. Gray gets hurt.
2 linemen.
We lose Harrison. We lose
Morris.
Wanye Morris. And then
obviously Harmon late in the game.
yeah, I mean that's
Just
the worst
devastating
injury
but
game
several
I can
of
ever
those
remember.
several of those injuries are. You're right. This goes back to like 90s era.
I mean, that's 6 starters. And then, Major's not in the game to begin with. Don't know why.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a bunch of guys that you're counting on to make plays.
And only
that
about
are
half
out.
of those were when the game was still actually
Right.
contested. So aside from that, I would give it 70% player, 30% coach. And maybe you could probably convince me it's more like 60-40. That I think the reason we lose today and the way we've lost is 70% attributable to the players, and not just their mistakes, but their level of talent, and 30% by the coaches getting out-coached and out-schemed on the line of scrimmage and throughout the play. But what do you guys think?
I think I'm around like 60-40 as well. I don't know if these coaches know how to handle. We talked about it in the midweek. Britt Venables, the players he's been dealing with up to this point, I don't know if he knows how to coach players who can't produce the way that he is used to.
Again, it's like you're reading my sheet,
I mean,
but I
he
want to
was
hear
here
Lucas
before.
first.
I mean, before he left, we had a downturn in defensive talent, I feel like. And
Yeah, but I mean,
Not like this.
But
like 9,
if
10,
you're-
11.
Not like this.
if you're as
though.
dominant as he's been for so
Yeah.
long,
Yeah.
for a decade,
He's a better coach coming now than when he left.
you know,
OU.
and I think that's what we, going back to the polls that we ran before the season and where we're going to finish in defensive efficiencies and stuff, and we're right on track those first 3 games.
Yeah.
And then you start seeing maybe true colors of some of these guys who are not Brent Venables guys.
Right.
So, and again, it goes back to, hey, if that's the case and you're not going to be winning games with these guys, don't play them and get the guys that are actually going to fit your system, get them in the game so that they can start understanding this is how things are going to work going forward.
So, Lucas, what do you think about attribution?
I think the K-State game was 70-30 coaching, and this game I could see 60-40 players because
Okay.
the speed wasn't there, and I don't think the speed in the K-State game was as big a factor as just not being in position. Today it seemed like the corners when they couldn't keep up with the receivers, they were taking the pass interferences.
And that one pass interference, I'm not even going to give him credit for it like it was a smart play. I think he was just so completely lost. He's falling down tackling the guy. He's not thinking, oh, I'm going to do this because I'm beat.
Right.
They just were clueless about what to do back there.
Well, and you look at our quote unquote best defensive back, our best cornerback in Woody Washington, and just getting worked on the edge.
Just totally
not looking like he knows what he should be doing as an elite, a supposedly elite cornerback or a supposedly great conference cornerback. It's simple stuff, man.
The
it's
other two
simple
major
stuff.
factors were tackling.
Yeah.
The last 2 games.
Yeah.
What happened?
Which is a player
we
issue.
went
What has
from
happened?
last game, we would hit him in the backfield, and they would. So it should have been a -2 if they make the tackle. Instead, it's a +5. Today, there wasn't any -2s to be had, but it was +9s instead of +4s. Over and over, it was just missed. Not necessarily just whiffs, but just not wrapping up, bouncing off a guy.
I watched
over and
I
over
watched
and over.
Isaiah Coe on like a 2nd and 6 hit a guy 2 yards past the line of scrimmage and push him past the first down line.
Mm-hmm.
Pushed him.
That happened with Deuce Vaughn last week as well.
I know, but I mean, it's just stuff like that. Like,
Yeah.
I know for a fact that's not what they're teaching in practice.
Right.
Like, and you look at the people who are missing tackles and who are not making the plays that should be made.
The same cast of characters week to week.
Same characters that we saw last year who were like, man, like when you're gang tackling someone, except instead of tackling them, all I see is fists flying trying to punch the ball out.
Right.
Like, stop.
And
Go make a
it's
play.
a desperation move at that point. And
Right.
you got a lot of guys. I mean, the missed tackles come in many varieties, and some of them are just excruciatingly bad. Like a side swipe trying to throw your hips into somebody and bouncing off of him, and he doesn't even hardly lose a step, and he's still on his feet running, and then the next guy misses him in a completely different way.
Yep.
Very frustrating stuff. Well,
When we stopped them on that 4th down, I think they had one that they went for 4th down that one time, and we stopped them on about our 40-ish. It seems like. I thought that was a moment that the tides may turn and we may get this thing back on
Yeah.
track, and then we just never did.
No, you're right.
I think that was right before the Gabriel injury, maybe.
Yeah, I think it was.
Yep. The game was
I think it
still
was literally the series.
possible.
Yeah, right before
And
it happened.
We stopped him on the 4th down, and then he goes out, but then we end up
We
scoring on
score,
the drive.
and then
because
we don't do
We handed
anything.
the ball off 4 more times in a row or whatever and
Uh-huh.
scored. And then, halftime starts, and we come back out, and it was like they're not going to let Bevel throw. And then when they did, he was so indecisive that nothing was coming from it. He finished with almost the same exact stat line as Gabriel.
But what I appreciate about not appreciate, but it's
7
I want
of
to
16 for 126 for Gabriel, 7 of 16 for 50 yards for
yeah.
Bevel.
See, but with Bevel, the thing I wanted to see, which is what I'd love to see with Gabriel, and I know Gabriel doesn't have the height or maybe the stature that Bevel does. Not maybe, he does not.
No, it doesn't.
But Bevel tried to stay in the pocket at least and
Right.
make a throw.
Right.
Gabriel, he looks like
Got
he
happy
looks
feet.
so panicky out there.
He does look panicky, and we commented and got irritated about Griffin III going on and on about his stance and how it was too wide. But it's all a
But
good
it's
point.
fair.
It's
It's
all
fair.
fair. We were just irritated because they kept talking about it and
it's-
showing
yeah,
it like
we know
it's
it's true,
a breakdown
dude.
of film,
Please
but
don't-
it was
please don't
totally
make it
true.
true.
It's a sign of his lack of talent at a certain level. So I wrote down before you said it, but it's exactly the same thought that you had, Connor, that Brent Venables can't coach bad players, and that's harsh. I don't mean it that literally, but not everybody is going to be great at everything, and
Yep.
you may be a great coach, and you're not going to be great in every facet, in every possible type of situation. Some people have skill sets that are better suited for certain situations than others. If you've got, say, by analogy, a CEO of a Fortune 500 company who's commanding tens of thousands of employees and it's a multi-billion-dollar organization, his skill set, as great as it is, doesn't necessarily translate into something that's a small-sized business, and especially a very small-sized business, and having success. If he comes in and tries to run a 10-person organization, he may fall flat on his face again and again and again because his skill set just is completely a mismatch.
Yep.
And when you look at the success that Brent Venables has had over the years and the level of talent he's grown accustomed to, he may not be the kind of guy who can work with a complete lower level of talent and true rebuilding type of situation in terms of making the most out of the players that you have, because he's probably trying to ask them to do things they're not capable of, and he's trying to build for the future. Now, I'd like to see him build some foundations now where we are with 2 losses so that young guys come in and almost sacrifice a loss this year or an additional loss or 2 this year so that they're that much better next year.
For sure.
I don't know how great of an argument
1999.
that is personally, because when he came on staff here in '99, we did not have any talent.
And we had a lot of talent.
The 2000
No,
team defense
we had a
was
lot of
great,
talent.
and we
We had a lot
didn't
of
have
talent.
that much talent
I would
on
say
defense.
on defense, I don't know. I think our defensive talent in '99 was probably about as good as our defensive talent today. Rocky Kalmus was in
outside
that
of 3
group.
or 4
I mean,
impact players. The rest of the team wasn't.
we had Derek Strait right out of the bat. We had there
I
was
mean,
a lot of
you got
talent
guys like
there.
Woolfolk that are moving from offense to defense because we had
Well,
lack of good defensive
I'd
players.
counter that with 2 things. One, I think you're not thinking about how talented we actually were, and we were only 7-5 in '99.
right.
And so if we're 7-5 this year, then it kind of just plays right into what I'm saying. Like that's consistent. We'll see what we do next year, and if we can elevate the level of defense and everything.
But what about
that
when he got
year.
to Clemson?
But
Clemson wasn't a juggernaut when he got there on defense.
they were pretty good. They were way better than
mean,
they
they
were
were-
better than we
they
are
were in a
now.
crappy
They were
conference,
better than
and-
us now.
and they weren't winning the conference necessarily.
And he
every
built
year.
them up and got them better with
Well,
better
and
recruiting.
he brought that up in a press conference that he
I mean,
had
Florida
earlier this
State
year.
was winning that conference
was,
year after year.
you know, when he first got to Clemson, one of the things was his defense was not what they were supposed to be the first half of the season. And then they hit a game or 2, and it's like, all right, finally, we're making steps in that right direction. And then by the end of the season, he said we were a lot closer to where I wanted to be as a defensive coordinator and where we should be. And that built on to the next season where you start seeing Clemson actually dominate.
I'd say
and
the record
become-
matches up perfectly with what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And he
No,
gets
it
better
does.
after he recruits people and builds on that very fast.
I'm not denying that we can't get better, but I'm saying the
No, no,
talent
I
on
know.
this team is better than we had when he stepped on the field in '99.
No, I don't think so.
And it's better than it stepped on the field in 2012 at Clemson.
I don't think either of those are true. I don't. I think if you look back at the guys from those teams that went to the NFL versus who is on the field right now,
I think if you would have seen some of the players like Isaiah Thomas and Nick Benito stay or something like that, then and Asamoah and some of those guys, then it's like, all right, like, yeah, this is that statement absolutely holds true. I can't look at this team and be like, who's our best defender right now? Who's our best defensive player? Billy Bowman, and
probably.
I would say our level of talent is
not very close after
low,
that. I mean,
and I think he's proven an inability to turn this team into more than. It's hard to say how much better they possibly could be with a different style coach, but it is the case that your skill set is going to be in one area or another. Just like there are certain coaches that max out in how good they can be, they also just aren't good at coaching. Well, like, look how difficult it is to coach at Texas, because you have to have a special skill set there to deal with the donors, to deal with the expectations, to deal with the talent level, and not everyone's well suited for that.
Yep.
So I don't think he's just, and I want the kind of coach who's well suited for championship football. I just don't think he's well suited for the Fresno State of the early 2000s type of team that is decently talented, not super all-stars, and going to be scrappy and try to put things together. I think he's going to try to, because that team's never going to be a championship-level team. But also, by the same token, if you try to coach championship-level football and you don't have the players to make it happen, it's going to be probably less successful than someone who's going to make do with what he's got. That's all I'm saying.
Well, and I think something I've been blind to, and maybe even some other fans, is on that similar plane is, with you go towards offense with Jeff Lebby and Dylan Gabriel specifically, and not to keep picking on Gabriel, but the product on the field that we've seen has not been up to par. I was under the impression, and maybe it's just me trying to convince myself of things, but Dylan Gabriel's been in this offense, been in Lebby's offense specifically, right, and he's going to be able to go and have immediate production and success because he's done things at Central Florida, which let's note the team. It's one of those things.
I'll have to agree. I overstated my expectations, or my expectations got ahead of myself as to what I thought could translate into really strong football, thinking that would just immediately get plugged in here at OU.
Right, and it's tough. I mean, no, it's exactly like. But my point is, it sucks because I know we had these expectations, and from everything we saw in the first 3 weeks, those expectations were relevant. Like, they were very, very legitimate expectations to say, look, we do have a shot at an 11-1 season, or even a 12-0 season after what we saw, and they've completely turned that on its side in the last 2 weeks. Both, and it's not even just one side of the ball, which sucks, because in the past we've been able to look at one side of the ball and say, we know this is the issue. This time we're kind of in disarray across the board. Even, look at special teams. Michael Turk, who's supposed to be the best punter in the nation, we're having to say, man, he's shanking punts now.
He averaged 47 today.
Yeah,
but he decent, but he shanked.
So but it's just
But we actually ran the ball. Farouk had 4 for 125 or something.
Yeah, very good success on
Farouk looked good back there, honestly. So
I like speed more.
And Bowman got hurt on a kickoff return.
That's frustrating, and we're too thin on defense, I think, to have that.
To risk it.
All these skill position kids are their kickoff returners in high school.
Right.
I would say every one of our receivers can catch the kickoff and take
it off. Yeah.
I don't know why. Bowman hasn't done anything spectacular yet, and it seems when you know what we have for his backup on the field, it seems like that wasn't a risk worth taking.
I agree.
Well, knock on wood, the good thing with him, quote unquote, is he's walking around the sideline. He didn't look like he was super banged up. I hope he's back next week.
I thought he was going to come back in the second half, honestly.
But but still, like, even you look at who came in his spot, Morrison in a lot of the positions played pretty well.
Yeah.
Like, he's flying towards the ball. He's not one of those guys who was on the team last year who has this maybe other mentality ingrained into the way he's playing football. Even if Bowman's back, let's see how you can run with those two together.
Yeah.
Like, he's faster than Key Lawrence.
Yep.
He's better than Harmon, which, again, the Harmon's different. But
Key Lawrence is a bigger body, but he was having guys bounce off of him when he was in there.
Yeah.
So Morrison might be the guy that you plug in for for the Broyles spot.
Until
and you run Bowman and Morrison in there.
until we see someone who's going and making plays on the football, that spot, those
every position should be up for grabs
defensive
on
back
defense.
spots should be up
Agreed.
for grabs.
We shouldn't have a single position on defense other than, I guess, you have to play probably Guemu and Stutzman just because they're the play callers essentially on defense or
And
whatever.
they know it, yeah.
Those two guys might be the only untouchables, quote unquote. But I mean, hell, we tried
still gotta
4
challenge
different
them.
corners today and nobody
Yep.
did the job.
No.
But I mean, at this rate, all these guys who are saying they're going to go leave early next year, I even look at someone like Jalen Redmond, who it hasn't been bad, but it's not like he's been, a difference maker in the game.
So have they been advertising that they think they're going to leave a year early?
I know for him, yeah, absolutely.
Well,
that's his goal.
They all need to reconsider that at this point very strongly and be very careful about that because there are just too many players out there with better track records. You need, and again, it gets back to those guys that left early last year who could have been benefiting under a Brent Venables system. You get a few years of development here, and your
You're getting-
draft
it's millions
stock
of dollars.
goes up a lot.
Yeah.
Well, I wanted to talk about what the thinking is going forward. I think this is now clearly a rebuilding year, unfortunately. None of us really expected that coming in, and maybe that's a little overstated. But at this point, with 2 losses in conference, I would say that it looks to be a rebuilding year.
Yeah,
Based
it's
on what
bleak.
the product we're seeing on the field, the capabilities, I think it's very much a rebuilding year. So what is the strategy going forward? I would say that I'd like to see us play a lot looser. I'd like to see, almost like you're saying, everybody plays. The only thing you might consider is who you strategically, if you have someone at this point, 5 games in, that you still could redshirt. Do you consider redshirting them? But is that really worth it with the talent you know you're bringing in this next year? Do you just go ahead and give guys as much experience as possible
Just
and
give
let
them
them
some
earn
run.
their position?
And then say, look, this isn't going to be a school where you're going to stick around for 5 years because I want you to be good enough if you're playing
Right.
to get out.
Yeah.
So I'm
You
of
better
that-
get going because you got 5 stars coming in behind
Yeah,
you.
and to the last point is, with these guys who we are saying are not good enough to leave early, I mean, what's the coach's advice? It's stay in the system and try to develop, or is it, I don't know if I can change you as a player at this point.
This is not the
and
right
I have
place for you.
I have other guys coming up who I need to get in my system.
Baylor has gone for some crazy.
So-
They just went for a 4th and 1 on their own 15-yard line.
Wow. You got it.
The last
4th and 1, I
drive
love it.
Baylor had,
Go for
they
it.
had a 4th and 5 on their own 30 or 35 and scored a touchdown.
You know I'm a sucker for the going forward on
Yep.
4th. I love it.
This is the kind of football I would have liked to seen earlier today.
Analytics speaks largely to
My
Going
thought for the
for it.
rest of the season is, as Connor said earlier, there's not a single gimme game on there, which is sad and pathetic for the fact that we have Kansas coming in. The OU Texas game is always a toss-up, but Kansas coming in isn't a sure thing.
We better hope to God we
as bad as
have
Iowa State
Gabriel
is,
for OU
We go
Texas.
to Iowa State, we could lose that game. West Virginia might be the only quote-unquote gimme game, and who knows what happens by the end of the season, who we have left standing on the field. So at this point, I'm just hoping we make a bowl game.
That's what we were saying in
I
there.
mean, we're looking at 7 and 5.
Christian brought up a
6
good
and 6.
point. This is a year. I mean, we may be fighting for a bowl game spot. So
Which is crazy to be saying that after what we saw early on.
I mean, for a team that was ranked, what did we get to, 6? Was that our highest?
no,
Yep.
ranking?
we were
Yep,
up to
we're 6.
were we up? Yeah, so we
got
never
up
got to
6,
5.
and
yeah.
now we're just hoping to make a bowl game. That's sad.
It's
and
crazy. Now, again, this may be the depths of despair right here, and it all changes because we play better and better game in and game out from here. As quickly as it turned negatively, it could potentially turn positive.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's plenty of opportunities for this team to change our mind, right?
Right.
There's plenty of opportunities to play the way that we saw in those first 3 games, but again, Steve, to your point, is you got to play a little bit more loose and a little bit more free, and just go for it, as
Yep.
opposed to, I don't know what we've watched the last 2 weeks.
I don't
It looks like a bunch of
understand it.
scared players who don't want to make a mistake, and by
Mm-hmm.
not wanting to make a mistake are getting blown off the ball and are getting worked over by the other team.
It does.
Because they're getting out-coached and out-schemed.
It-
And we're
it-
not making any adjustments.
and not or at least not making the right adjustments.
Right.
No, it's like
And if we're trying to make adjustments, the players aren't keeping up with it to
Yeah,
actually be able to
it's-
go and execute.
It's absolutely not. It's falling on deaf ears. Well, before we get into some stricter predictions for where we think we'll end up as a team, I'd like to compare us to another team and say, is this us? Connor and I were talking about this earlier. Are we Texas A&M? Texas A&M is facing today their second loss. They'll have the same record, 3-2. They've had better success recruiting over the last couple of years, and obviously are having a great year recruiting right now. But they've had a couple of really disappointing games. I would like to think in many respects we're not Texas A&M, but there are some parallels here that are kind of frustrating. What do you think, Lucas? Are we Texas A&M?
I can't. We're not Texas A&M because they've proven on a consistent basis that they are an 8-4 and 9-3 at best. Other than when they have a Heisman Trophy winning quarterback,
right?
Which they still can't get into any meaningful
if we
ball.
went 4 years in a row and have an 8-4, 9-3, then I could say, yeah, we've probably sunk into the Texas A&M level. But even a crap season this year, if we go 8-4, 7-5, I mean, it's you. I couldn't compare us to that team.
I would agree.
Yeah,
it's scary.
Yeah, I hate that we're having to draw parallels and try to understand what this team is because we haven't had to do that. I think we've kind of stood on our own. OU has been OU for a while, and I think you can say OU has been a team that is better than those Texas A&M teams and those other teams that are almost there, but not as good as the teams that are already there, like an Ohio State or an Alabama or a Clemson or a Georgia lately. But now we're at a point where I've got to sit on the fact where, and I wasn't consciously tuned in for this, but after reading and listening to you guys, this sounds so much like what we were in '99 in terms of just what we are as a team, that you have to hope that everything that's happening behind the scenes and underneath what we see on the field on Saturdays is building towards something next year or the year after to go and make a very viable elite product.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. I do think that it has echoes of the 90s. Now, some people who are going to be really catastrophizing about it and mad today in a blowout loss, they're going to say it's like the Blake years, but it's not.
Right. It's not.
It does have a lot of similarities to 1999. Disappointing losses, sometimes inexplicable losses, things not turning in your favor. But it also has it rings a little bit of the early Gibbs years. And that was in particular 1989, where we're already depleted on scholarships because of probation. We had a tremendous number of injuries that year. And I'd hate to see us have a season that goes into the tank this year because of injuries out of a game like this. So we'll see what that does.
Was there a blowout game in the 99 schedule? I mean, we lost a close one to Notre Dame that we were leading. We lost a close one to Texas that we were leading.
No, there wasn't
we were leading in every game in '99,
except for the Colorado game.
Except for the Colorado game, yeah.
And that was a close game.
And that was a close.
Yeah. We went to that.
Yeah,
game.
there weren't any blowouts.
We
so
went to Texas.
It's not a
we went to
perfect
Texas
parallel.
Tech, where we were leading the majority of the game, and then Kingsbury.
Mississippi wasn't a blowout, but we never led in that game.
They literally won it on the final play of the game with a field goal.
No, we had an attempt to go down and win it, and they called us. Oh no, yeah, that's right, because we had a bad call. Well, they had a bad call on a 15-yard penalty for too many men on the field.
Yeah.
But that was a game that, yeah, I mean, it was.
So
we should not have lost that game.
We did not have a game in '99 that was like today.
No. I mean, I'm not saying it's exactly the same.
Right.
The schedule's not exactly the same, but I say it rings to similar because it's all of these losses that you're scratching your head and you keep saying we're a better team than this, we can do better than this, and you see players make mistakes that are just frustrating, but hopefully it's building on something getting better and better and better, and we'll see. Unfortunately, it looks like it's going to come after a full season of football and maybe into the next year. So I'm going to say, though, I'm going to be optimistic and say we turn things around, kind of hopeful for the sake of the players and the coaches, a lot of faith in them. I think we're good for one more loss, and I think we end the regular season 9-3. That'd be my prediction at this point right now.
Yeah, after today, and maybe it's just thematically going to go with what we've been saying all year. I don't even know how to feel after today. That was really painful. A lot has to change with some of these teams that we're playing.
It does. If we play like today,
right,
we're going to be lucky to be 6-6.
I think we will. I think there will be some opportunities for us to show the talent that exists. What we saw today is not exemplary.
No, it's
does
not indicative of
exemplify
what we are. But neither did apparently the first 3 games.
I don't know. There's man, just looking at the schedule ahead and watching some of these teams play. We'll see what happens next week, and maybe I'll have a little bit better idea. But I'm feeling more 8-4 than I am 9-3. And man, I don't even want to go to 7-5.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't want to have to be fighting for a bowl game. But it feels a little bit more 8-4-ish. It feels a little bit like the 2009 Sun Bowl year when we go and play Stanford. So I want to be wrong. I would love for us to, even if just one more loss, and if it's not even a loss like today, I'm not going to be super upset about it. But man, there's got to be. It just sucks because we hear the preaching that comes out of this team, and Brent Venables is so passionate about how he prepares and how he wants his players to prepare and what we do going into games, and then to see something like we saw today, it's just, I don't even know how to, it's not the same. It doesn't add up.
Mm-hmm.
So I hope that at some point translates from the press conference to the field. So we'll see. But I'm feeling a little bit more 8-4 than I am 9-3.
What do you think, Lucas?
I think it's entirely too optimistic, and I think it's a 7-5, maybe a 6-6. A big part of it is going to be Dylan Gabriel's situation. If he misses a couple games, there's no chance with what I saw today in the backup situation that we can do anything. And with the defense playing as poor as it is, even if they got better, we can't move the ball offensively with Davis Bevel at quarterback because he looked completely lost out there, just holding the ball too long. Our running game was okay after he went in, but still not great. And
That's good, but we should get in that in the second in the running game.
even if our defense gets better, if Gabriel, and even with Gabriel, overthrows one after another. What sucks is we were wanting him to do some more running, and then the first time he really takes off running, we get a horrible late hit.
Yeah, and it's not something that he made a mistake in doing running.
He did the right thing.
He did
slid,
perfectly.
And then you got the Bush League, which we were talking about it. TCU has been known for that. They had the safety that got thrown out 2 games in a row against us.
2 years in a row against us.
Us. And I was thinking maybe even in the Big 12 championship game, he might have got thrown out too.
Well,
I
I
think
don't
you're
remember
right.
the guy's name, but it seems like either 2 or 3 games in a row, that same safety had late targetings, late hit targeting or whatever you want to call it, against us. And then today, I don't know that it was malicious, but it was just dumb.
Well, I had a TCU fan
was rough.
who texted me, who was at the game, say that's one of the worst hits I've seen in a while.
Yeah.
And again,
even if Gabriel plays the rest of the game, we don't win because
part of
the
that's
defense was so bad.
Yeah,
But
part of
it's
that's
not
a
like
pity
that.
text.
We probably
but
lose by 14 instead
Right.
of 31.
And he's going to play next week no
and
matter
he's playing
what.
next week.
Yeah.
But
Right.
now everything's up in the air. I don't think there's any chance we beat Texas if Gabriel doesn't start.
I would agree with that.
Well, I don't know about any
I mean,
chance, but it's
there
very
is,
low
yeah.
probability.
I'd say
Very
20%
slim
chance we
chance.
beat Texas if Gabriel is
Yep.
not on the field.
Yeah, we
And
don't have a Hudson Card at backup.
If Gabriel's out and Bowman's out and one of the 2 linemen are out, Gray is out. We're in for some crap if 3 or 4 of these guys don't play for the next couple games.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, we got a bye
Definitely
week. We got
agree with that
Texas
risk
and Kansas
or
and a
worry.
bye week. But man,
I would agree with that word.
the next 2 look very scary if we're missing 3 or 4 of those guys.
Well, one bit of optimism potentially to close on, but we may have more to say, would be we do need to look at this as the season has ended and a new season has begun, and we get to start fresh. Our expectations get readjusted, and what we're trying to go for now is very different. So now we're looking to just see things that are things to build on for the future. We get to hopefully see some players that are young that develop this year and give us promise into next year. Get to continue to watch a great recruiting class built, despite the recent setbacks. So it's just a different perspective. It's an unfortunate one. It's not one that we want. This is not what a Sooner is looking for as a fan. You're looking to be a championship contender. But that it is something we just have to deal with the reality, to be realist here and say, well, we have to reset to where we are, and where we are is a team that is 3-2 with a lot of upside potential and not the same downside risk. Everything that we're going for is kind of already lost. So go ahead and just go out
Exactly.
there and do the best you can and see what you can accomplish.
Well, and you got to hope Venables
see
sees
where you
it the
can
same
get.
way in the coaching staff and says, look, we're at a point in time where we're more than likely out of the conference championship race, at least at this point. You're 0-2, and you got to hope that he says, look, these positions that we thought were solidified and we had locked down, let's next man up.
Yep.
Who's the guy? If Deshaun White, you're not getting the job done. All right, Kanik, we burned your red shirt this week. What do you got? You know, so you got to hope that they see it the same way we do with the opportunities that are out there. I think there's a lot of opportunities for players to go and establish themselves, and there's going to be mistakes along the way. But if you have a guy who can go out and make plays, let's put him in the game.
Well, for goodness sakes, and we did this a little bit today, which disappointed me, don't lose conventionally from here on out.
Yeah.
Don't play it safe and lose that way.
Yeah.
If
It
you're
was
going to
so
lose,
boring.
lose trying.
We wanted
It was
to
so
the
boring.
rush 3, drop 8, and we got it, and it didn't do anything for us.
Nothing.
No.
Well, but I mean, to that point
The
is,
guys weren't the 8 that were dropping weren't in the position they needed to be in.
and unfortunately, it took Marcus Major not playing today. It took an injury to Eric Gray, but
Barnes in the
Javante
game.
Barnes is a feature back.
Yeah.
He looks like
He
the
looks
kind
like
of guy
he's
you
gonna-
want to
he's
build
gonna be
a
the
running
guy.
game on.
So-
Yeah. And I don't mean to be too down on Major and Gray, but I just don't think they're the players that we want at that position. Very similar to Gabriel's not the guy that we want going forward. It would disappoint me in the next 20 years of great championship football under Brent Venables if we end up with a Dylan Gabriel as our starting quarterback or a running back at only the level of what I see right now in Gray and Major. Now, I could be surprised by any of these three guys that I'm downing right now, and I give them a chance to prove me wrong. But from what I see right now, I don't think they're really the caliber of player at that key position that we want. And I really do see it in Barnes as he's potentially that type of a guy. And hopefully next year with and Arnold, we'll get to see glimpses of what he can produce in the future, even if he's not the starter next year.
I just want to see some lethal talent at the skill level, which we've been used to, obviously. And I think after watching it today, you can't underscore enough how important it is to have talent at those positions, regardless of what you're doing on the other side of the ball. If you can't go and make plays, which, man, just like this, like we're watching OSU right now. If you can't have, and this is talking
One-handed
defensively,
interception.
but yeah, if you can't have
Running
guys
out
who
of
are just
bounds,
attacking and
awareness of the
wanting
football.
to go make plays,
Boy, just a great.
I mean, it's just,
that's two hands.
Well, he finished with the
God, he
one.
did finish.
but
with
it's
one
just, it's a great play. Like I want to see that. I want to see guys who want to go do that.
This has been a great game to like. This is a fun game to watch.
Uh-huh.
I don't really care who wins this game, honestly, but I think both of these teams are good, and this is what football looks like.
Yeah.
Right.
What we watched earlier is not what football
No.
looks like.
No, it isn't.
No, we were super one-dimensional.
I'm
and
really
it was,
scared
It was
that
tough.
we just got blown out by a team that's going to finish about, I don't know,
Middle
fifth
of the
in the
pack.
conference.
Middle of the pack
Yeah.
of the conference,
So
behind a first place.
We're going to be
Kansas.
lucky to finish fifth in the conference.
we could be. We could be.
Be
As of
very-
right now,
very
we're going to
lucky.
be lucky to finish above the middle of the pack for
Yep.
sure.
Yeah.
I completely agree with that.
Now, let's not overplay what we saw in one game, just like we shouldn't
games.
overplay what we saw in. Well, don't overplay what we saw in three. 3 out of 2 have been tremendous. So
Yeah.
I don't know where the truth lies. Somewhere in the middle.
Yep.
You do have to put a little more emphasis probably on what you see recently, not to introduce recency bias, but when you see after a couple of games, you put some film out there, and now we have people that look like they, or coaches are seeing what you do, what your tendencies are, what your capabilities are, and they're catching up to you very quickly. That is concerning. So I'd give a little more emphasis to the last 2 games than I would the prior 3, but all of them are important.
Well,
all
and
of them
at this
indicate who
point,
we are.
every time you step on the field as one of those players, it's a chance to prove everyone wrong. Because
That's right.
because everyone has
And have that attitude.
You have your chips against you now.
Yeah.
And now every time you step on the field, it's unfortunately, and I say this because it's maybe famous last words, you're only going up from here. I mean, it doesn't get much worse than what we saw. I haven't seen a game like that since 2014.
Well, LSU.
Well, LSU, and again, that's
and Bama.
You're Bama,
I don't know about Bama.
Bama, we
Only the
came
first
back.
quarter
It's a bad
against
first
But
quarter.
only
Bama.
because
It was a
we
bad
had the
first
best
quarter.
player in the country on the team.
Well, yeah, it was
That's
only the first
point.
quarter.
It
Though.
is the first quarter, and I think if we don't give up 1 or 2 of those touchdowns
we're
in the
not going
first,
that
it's-
far back in the past. Anyway.
But anyways, what I'm saying is, regardless, what we saw on the field today was not what we're accustomed to in the past 10 years.
No.
Maybe 8 years. 2014-ish type of team, but when we're having to
Can
run,
you play
when we're having
worse?
to run
Sure.
Cody Thomas
Not
out
much
there at
worse,
quarterback.
but you sure as heck can play better.
Right.
And look at a year where we were on rotating 3 different quarterbacks in the same game, and we beat OSU to win the conference. So
You just got to
things
find an
can
identity.
happen. You just got to find that.
We
and
don't have
find
an
that,
identity
that
right
want,
now.
that identity, that motivation, and you've got to get it translated into the players and getting them wanting to play. Maybe they can rally around guys like Harmon who have been injured and say, we got to finish strong for him.
Yep.
We got to finish strong for the guys that are sort of the fallen heroes.
I want
so
them to do
speak.
it for their own pride.
Absolutely.
Like, show yourself.
Yeah.
Play better.
You guys
Don't
have
go
been
get embarrassed again.
Yeah.
When you should have the mentality that we're the kings of this conference, and we need to go show it.
Yep. That's a great point. I like that.
Kings of the conference. I like
of
it.
the conference.
I like it.
We're going to run with that. Well, anything else to add before we sign off on this very, very disappointing?
Next week's a big week.
It is a big week. It's
so-
OU Texas, and we'll try to get a midweek pod out. We'll see what we can do. So I try to get some hope in our conversation, but we'll see. It's very
Cotton Bowl
scary.
may solve all of our problems.
It may,
Or it
be
may
a wonderful
proliferate
thing, or it
everything
may be
else.
very, 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 very painful.
So we'll see.
I've seen it all there in the Cotton Bowl in nearly.
I think last
40
closing
years.
thought. I think something I put into perspective today is, as much as you never think it's going to happen to you and your team. At least me. Like I watching Texas beat Texas and watching Texas A&M beat Texas A&M. It's like
That ain't us.
that's not us. It's not going to happen to us. We're in that spot right now.
We are.
So and again, back to what I just said. It's an opportunity to respond. It's an opportunity for Brent Venables to change the tide and really instill something here. So I don't want to say excited. I'm anxious to see what we have coming up, because it's really going to define, who we are the rest of this year.
I would completely agree. Boomer?
Sooner.
Sooner.